cause I'm on one.
You know, we have ones that's Ras Tafari, live in the city, Kingston City, Manhattan, like you know, we live amongst our universal brothers and sisters, and Rastafari is for each and every one. So it's not a...
Swinging for the fences for the home run.
Habesha, Megusana, Gesta Ethiopia. Habesha, Mr. Maya, the Farambasa. Habesha.
Even further beyond into the universe, but I've got to make it to first.
Urgent message from the 12 seers of Mount Zion. They said the black nation will be blessed by God in these days. Circle the mountain and go home. Shabbat. Mount Zion calling me.
Alright, so in more European woes and troubles, aside from Brexit, and we spoke on this quite a few times here before, but just to update ones on what's actually been coming down the pipe, proverbially at this point. Here from Foreign Policy, the European Union needs to prepare for the next wave of migrants. Subtitle here goes further. New arrivals are ticking up again, but Europe doesn't even have a short-term plan in place, much less a long-term strategy. Coming from James Blake, November 22nd of 2019, reads on as follows. In 2015, at the start of the wave of migrants who hit European shores over the next few years, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that migration and asylum would preoccupy Europe much more than the issue of Greece and the stability of the euro. The major concern following the 2007 to 2008 global financial crisis. 4 years later, few would argue with her statement. In 2016, British citizens voted to leave the European Union in part over fears of migration. Across the continent, far-right extremism, likewise fueled by xenophobia, has risen. Worries about Islamist terrorism, meanwhile, have grown. Yet the continent not only lacks a coordinated, humane, and comprehensive policy on immigration, which is only going to become more pressing in the months and years to come, but also seems unable to agree on even short-term measures. It is not possible to forget the images of thousands of refugees fleeing violence ahead of the Islamic State's conquest of Iraq and Syria. The vast majority of them used smugglers whom they paid off to board overloaded rubber dinghies on the west coast of Turkey, traveling with a trash bag to hold their belongings and a cell phone to direct themselves. They were unsure whether they would survive the crossing into Greece, let alone to Europe, where they planned to settle. During a short visit I took to Istanbul, the delegation I traveled with witnessed a group of several hundred refugees who were apparently locked up in a park next to the bus station as the authorities dragged their feet, unsure of what to do with those new arrivals and unwilling to let them move on to the Turkish border to attempt to make their next move into Europe. Following months of confusion, uncertainty, and hyperbole, it was to Turkey that the European Union turned to offer a financial deal in March of 2016 to keep the refugees and migrants in that country, believing that it would prevent unchecked arrivals into Europe. The deal was unpopular on the left. Aid groups highlighted the issues with sending refugees back to Turkey, in particular, the legal issues associated with the 1951 Refugee Convention. Meanwhile, with a sudden increase in support for far-right parties, including in Hungary, Austria, and France, there was a growing view that the new arrivals posed a threat to both security and the identity of Europe itself. The polarized debate persists, despite the recent outing of Italy's anti-immigrant Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, whose closed harbor policy effectively banned refugees and migrants from entering Italy. The right's position, hard borders, and limits on integration and resettlement initiatives generally holds sway. Those on the left of the debate continue to call for open borders, pointing to some evidence that the migrants could bring economic benefits. In Armenia, for example, the government has accepted refugees from the Armenian diaspora, After being integrated, this policy has proved successful in bringing in people with new skills and helping grow businesses across the country. As the debate continues, real people are suffering. In Libya, the United Nations has described the situation inside detention camps where migrants are held as they attempt to cross the Mediterranean into Europe as appalling. In 2017, European Council President Donald Tusk announced that he would close the central Mediterranean migration route, which in practice has meant that those refugees and migrants seeking to enter Europe via Libya have been stuck in the detention centers. Libyan Coast Guard boats have intercepted European-bound boats and sent them back to the Libyan detention centers where refugees and migrants have been denied sufficient food and medical care. Hundreds of those who have tried to cross from the camps to Europe died trying to make the crossing of this past year. Meanwhile, there has been a steady rise in the number of refugees and migrants arriving in Greece. The latest figures indicate that 44,000 asylum seekers traveled across the Aegean Sea between January and November, an increase of one-third over the 32,500 through all of 2018. Tens of thousands of them live in horrific circumstances in Greek camps. In late October, the Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunja Mijatovic, said that the camps are on the edge of catastrophe and explosive. She estimated that there are 100,000 migrants and refugees living in bad conditions in the country, with a long delay in processing asylum applications. At the end of October, though, the newly elected Greek government enacted tighter asylum laws, which means people caught in the system will stay there longer. And on November 19th, Alkiviadis Stefanis, the Greek deputy defense minister, announced that Athens was shutting the Moria camp on Lesbos to process asylum claims that 15,000 asylum seekers there. The previous week, Greek police discovered 41 migrants in a refrigerated truck in the country's north. The incidents are a reminder that, for many migrants, the risks are worth the chance to start a new life. And in the coming months and years, Europe could see even more refugees attempting to get to its borders. Along with the ongoing conflicts in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, there is a growing realization that climate migration will result in a large influx of people from newly uninhabitable places, all seeking to rebuild their lives.